I didn't expect my own birthday to feel like a trap, but the moment the cake arrived, I realized it had been carefully set up, like a spotlight exposing every flaw they had ever noticed. The words on the frosting hit me before anything else. Oops? Still a disappointment? My mom clapped like it was the funniest thing she'd ever seen. My brother laughed so hard, he almost spit out his drink. My dad just leaned back, eyes narrowing slightly, waiting to see how I would react. And me? I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there for a heartbeat, feeling all the years of judgment and expectation crash down in one ugly moment. Before I dive into everything that led to that moment, I want to ask you, where are you watching from right now? Chicago, London, Paris, or somewhere else? Because wherever you are, I promise this story isn't just about a birthday gone wrong. It's about family secrets, betrayal, and the moment I finally started seeing the truth. I'm Hannah Blake, 27, and I stepped into a retro diner in Chicago that my mom, Margaret Blake, had chosen as if it were a stage. Neon signs buzzed above the counter, red vinyl booths gleamed under fluorescent lights, and chrome edges reflected the tension already sitting heavy in my chest. I'd been to countless family events like this, each one a test disguised as a celebration. Margaret had claimed a corner booth, her posture perfect, glass of iced tea in hand, eyes flicking to me with that familiar mix of inspection and expectation. David, my dad, sat beside her, shoulders slumped, resigned to let the evening pass without stepping in. Logan, my younger brother, lounged across from me, phone in hand, snapping short videos whenever the air tickled with laughter. Sliding into the booth felt less like sitting down for a meal and more like stepping onto a tightrope I'd walked for years. Every glance Margaret threw my way seemed loaded with a question. Are you what I wanted you to be? Her words floated casually across the table, each comment a small sting disguised as concern. David mostly stayed neutral, his hands folded on the table, watching without intervening. Logan barely looked up from his phone, waiting for the right moment to capture me in some compromising expression, like the world could see me only through his lens. The food arrived. Burgers that sagged on their plates, fries that left greasy fingerprints on the table, milkshakes sweating under the harsh diner lights. Conversation drifted, carefully steered toward my job hunt and my future, as if I weren't already aware of my own uncertainties. Margaret brought up people my age with stable careers and tidy plans, letting the silence afterward hang like a noose. I felt it weigh on my shoulders, the implication that I was behind, that I had failed, though no one said the word outright. And then, the cake. A simple sheet cake carried by a server through the buzzing diner, candles flickering. The table around me seemed to lean in, ready for the punchline. I let myself hope, for a fleeting 3 seconds, that it would be harmless. Maybe a funny message, something playful. But then I saw it. Oops, still a disappointment. The air seemed to freeze. Laughter erupted, shrill and judgmental. Margaret clapped as if she had staged the best performance of her life. Logan held his phone higher, zooming in. David's face remained cautious, like someone watching a glassed heater on the edge of a table. I remember gripping my chair, trying to steady myself, my heartbeat loud in my ears. That moment wasn't about the cake. It was about every little cutting remark, every subtle comparison, every sigh of disappointment that had been woven into my life by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. The cake simply spelled it out for everyone to see. I didn't shout, didn't argue. I pushed back my chair, picked up my bag, and walked toward the exit, leaving a stunned family behind. Margaret called after me, "Hannah, it's just a joke. Take a joke." I didn't turn. David tried to intervene subtly. Logan whispered, "Don't make a scene." But I had nothing left to prove. My whispered words to my uncle that night would ripple far beyond that diner, though they didn't know it yet. Stepping out into the cold Chicago evening, I felt a strange mix of fear, anger, and clarity. For the first time, I realized the performance of being the perfect daughter had ended, and that moment, the cake, the laughter, the judgment, was just the spark lighting a fire I hadn't known I carried inside me. A few months before my birthday disaster, I was back at my parents' house helping my dad, David Blake, clear out his old office. The room had always been more storage closet than workspace, the kind of place that smelled faintly of dust, old paper, and lingering coffee stains. Boxes were stacked haphazardly, some leaning like they were about to topple over, and every surface was layered with years of forgotten documents. I had assumed I was just there to help him move a few odds and ends, to be useful for a Saturday morning. But as I dug deeper, something stopped me cold. Tucked in the far corner of a lower shelf was a cream-colored folder with my name scrawled in blue ink, Hannah Blake, across the front. Beneath my name, in smaller, precise handwriting, was the word education. My pulse quickened before I even opened it. Something about the folder felt sacred, as if it had been holding its breath all those years, waiting for me to notice. I pulled it gently from the stack, careful not to disturb the surrounding chaos. The weight of it in my hands made it feel real in a way no conversation ever had. Inside were pages from an investment company, old account statements, and forms, all showing contributions to a college fund supposedly set aside for me. At first, my chest swelled with relief and a spark of gratitude. My grandfather, Richard Blake, had opened the account years ago. His shaky, slow signature on the papers matched the handwriting I remembered from his birthday cards. I could almost imagine a future where I had walked onto a college campus without panicking over tuition, where I had a safety net that was real, solid, and meant for me. But as I flipped through more pages, that rhythm broke. Deposits stopped abruptly. Withdrawals appeared, large chunks of money leaving the account for reasons vaguely explained. The names on the forms weren't always my grandfather's. Some withdrawals were signed by my mother, Margaret Blake, others by my uncle, Ethan Blake. Notes on the forms were cryptic: family needs, temporary help, emergency expenses, each one as ambiguous as it was deliberate. My stomach twisted as it became clear what I was holding. The fund that had been meant to protect my future had been siphoned away without my knowledge, redirected to family expenses, to priorities that weren't mine. I sat cross-legged on the carpet, the folder open across my knees, and I could feel years of small betrayals and offhand comments crashing together into clarity. The snide remarks at dinner, the quiet judgments, the subtle comparisons to others, all of it now had context. The laughter at my birthday cake wasn't just cruelty in the moment. It was the tip of an iceberg that had existed for years, a system that had quietly robbed me of resources I was supposed to have. My hands shook, but my mind felt sharp. I pulled out my phone and methodically photographed every page. Each image captured a story that had been kept from me, a narrative no one had ever explained. I double-checked that each photo was clear, legible, and complete. This wasn't just about money, it was about control, deception, and the quiet reshaping of my life without my consent. Once I had everything documented, I carefully stacked the papers as they had been, slid the folder back into the box, and closed the lid. I carried it downstairs with the weight of years pressing on me. The drive home was silent, except for the hum of the car engine and the faint rustle of the folder in my bag. My thoughts raced. How had I missed this before? How had they made me believe, over and over, that I was behind, ungrateful, or incapable, when in reality I had been fighting a system designed to limit me from the start? For hours afterward, I didn't speak to anyone. I stayed in my small apartment, letting the quiet settle around me. There was fear, yes, and a sharp sting of betrayal. But there was also a strange sense of clarity. I finally had the proof. I finally knew the truth. And even though I wasn't ready to confront it yet, I understood that this knowledge had shifted something inside me. I was no longer wandering blindly in a narrative someone else had written. That night, as I set the folder carefully on my desk, I made a promise to myself. This secret was mine to hold for now, and when the time came, I would expose the truth and reclaim what had been taken. For the first time, the weight of their control felt tangible, and I knew exactly how heavy it had been, and how strong I needed to be to finally lift it. After days of sitting with the folder and the photos I had taken, I finally reached out to my Aunt Olivia Harper. She lived in Milwaukee, far enough away to avoid most of the family drama, yet close enough that she had always maintained a delicate awareness of what was happening. Her voice on the phone was cautious at first, polite in a way that suggested she didn't want to be dragged into arguments. "Hannah," she said, "are you sure about all of this?" "Yes," I said, my voice tight, almost trembling despite the clarity of my conviction. "I have the account statements, the investment forms, every single withdrawal, and it's all tied to my college fund. None of it was ever for me. Mom and Uncle Ethan used it. I have it all documented." There was a pause on the line, long enough to make me wonder if she was angry, shocked, or just trying to process it. I thought there was money saved. she whispered finally. Your grandfather mentioned it once, but everything your mom said made me think I was imagining it. Her words felt like a release and a confirmation at the same time. I explained page by page how the deposits had been consistent at first, and how the withdrawals had begun subtly before escalating into full diversion, leaving almost nothing by the time I had applied for financial aid. I could hear her taking notes, quietly acknowledging every detail. Hannah, she said firmly, you need someone professional. This isn't just family drama anymore. You have to take it to someone who understands the law. Olivia sent me the contact information for a small law office tucked above a coffee shop on Main Street, Chicago, specializing in family financial abuse cases. The idea of walking into a lawyer's office made my chest tighten. The scent of old paper, polished wood, and a faint trace of coffee followed me in my imagination. When I arrived, I felt like I was crossing into a different world, a place where my proof would finally matter. The lawyer, Mr. Thompson, greeted me with a measured calm. He didn't react to my emotions, just glanced at the stack of papers I had brought. Hannah, let's start at the beginning, he said. His voice was deliberate, careful, grounding. Walk me through what you found. I laid out the story in order, explaining the initial setup of the fund by my grandfather, Richard Blake, the regular deposits, and then the irregular withdrawals signed by my mother, Margaret, and Uncle Ethan. I emphasized the labels that disguise the movement of the money: family emergency, temporary help, and how none of it had touched the intended purpose: my education. As I spoke, I watched Mr. Thompson make meticulous notes, checking dates, amounts, and signatures. He asked pointed questions, but never interrupted unnecessarily. I could feel the weight of years of secrecy and manipulation pressing on me, yet in that moment, there was a strange relief. For the first time, someone outside my family was seeing the full truth, and they validated it without judgment. He leaned back and said, Hannah, legally, this fund was intended solely for you. The withdrawals weren't mistakes. They were intentional diversions. You have grounds to demand repayment and any accrued interest. Hearing those words made my stomach lurch. It wasn't a victory yet. There were still steps to take, documents to file, and strategies to plan. But it was the first time I realized that I wasn't powerless. We mapped out the process: formal letters to Margaret and Ethan detailing the misuse, copies to Olivia so that another adult in the family would witness the proceedings, and official records requested from the investment company and bank to ensure nothing relied solely on my copies. Every step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, like setting boundaries in a way I had never been able to before. As I left the office, the Chicago wind bit at my cheeks, sharp and clear, and I realized how much energy I had spent keeping silent, hiding the truth, and pretending everything was fine. That silence had protected them, not me. Now, with Olivia's support and a legal path forward, I felt the first glimmer of agency in years. I carried the folder home, lighter somehow despite its weight, knowing that the quiet act of preparation, the phone calls, the documents, the validation from a professional, was already shifting the balance. I had turned knowledge into power. I had turned betrayal into evidence. And for the first time, I knew that my future was no longer theirs to control. I stepped into the courtroom that morning, feeling a strange mix of nerves and resolve. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and paper, dry and antiseptic, carrying the weight of decisions that could change everything. I wasn't walking in as the hesitant daughter who had endured years of subtle judgment. I was carrying evidence, proof, and a story that had been silenced for far too long. The judge glanced at me briefly, then at my lawyer, a nod signaling we could proceed. Mr. Thompson began presenting the case. He laid out the history of the fund, starting with the careful contributions from my grandfather, Richard Blake, the original intent, and the steady deposits that had promised a future I was never meant to lack. His voice was calm but authoritative, each word measured, forcing the room to pay attention to facts rather than drama. I watched Margaret Blake, my mother, in the gallery across the room. She adjusted her scarf, her hands tight around a purse, eyes darting nervously. Ethan Blake sat beside her, shoulders stiff, jaw clenched, as if the papers themselves were a threat. David Blake was in the back, hunched and quiet, his expression unreadable. I could feel the tension radiating off them, a stark contrast to my own calm focus. Page by page, Mr. Thompson detailed every withdrawal that had been made from the fund. Each line showed not only the amount, but who had authorized it, and under what vague justification? Family emergency, temporary support, household expenses. Each label a veil over a deliberate diversion of money that was never intended to leave my account. The courtroom fell into a rhythm. He would present. I would glance at the statements, and I could see the realization dawning on everyone else. Margaret tried to interject once, her voice trembling slightly. It wasn't meant to hurt Hannah. These were difficult decisions. The judge cut her off, polite but firm. We are examining documented evidence, not intentions. You will have an opportunity to explain, but the records speak first. I felt a surge of vindication. The rules of the game had changed. No more dismissive comments, no more side glances of disappointment. This was concrete. Ethan leaned forward, whispering something under his breath to Margaret. I didn't care. Each second brought clarity, each page reinforced the truth I had carried silently for so long. I remembered nights spent worrying about tuition, piecing together loans, and feeling like the world had been stacked against me. Now I could see exactly why. It wasn't incompetence. It wasn't fate. It had been deliberate. Mr. Thompson closed the final binder and looked up at the judge. Your Honor, the account clearly shows funds intended for Ms. Hannah Blake's education were diverted to other purposes by Margaret Blake and Ethan Blake. Without her consent or knowledge, we request repayment of all principal plus accrued interest, with enforcement measures available if compliance is not met. The judge nodded, reviewing the documents once more. The court finds in favor of Ms. Blake. Margaret Blake and Ethan Blake are ordered to repay the full amount, including any accumulated interest. Failure to comply will result in liens against property and other enforceable remedies. The words landed in the room with a quiet but undeniable finality. No cheers, no dramatic gasps, just a weighty sense of justice being acknowledged. I exhaled slowly, feeling tension bleed from my shoulders. Relief mingled with a solemn recognition that this was not a windfall or a triumph over some abstract enemy. This was a recovery of what had been stolen, delayed, but now undeniable. I felt both lighter and heavier at once, lighter for the acknowledgement of truth, heavier for all the years lost. Margaret's face was pale, Ethan's jaw tight. David still observed quietly. They couldn't argue with the documents. They couldn't dismiss the paper trail or the legal authority behind it. And for the first time, I felt the separation between their control and my autonomy. My future was finally mine, measured not by their narratives or justifications, but by facts, law, and the evidence I had gathered. Walking out of that courtroom, the Chicago air felt different. Sharp, cold, yet full of possibility. I carried with me the quiet power of reclaiming my life, the clarity that comes when hidden truths are finally seen. For the first time in years, I understood that this wasn't just about money. It was about agency, recognition, and the right to stand unapologetically in my own story. After the courtroom, the world felt both heavier and lighter at the same time. Margaret Blake's house, once a private fortress of control, became a point of curiosity and speculation in real estate circles. Ethan faced mounting financial pressure, the kind that comes when the consequences of past actions finally catch up. Other family members started keeping their distance, not because they suddenly saw me differently, but because they felt the ripple of accountability hitting closer than they expected. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel the need for validation from anyone in that family. For the first time in years, I understood that my value wasn't tied to their approval, their justification, or the lies they told themselves about sacrifice. I could breathe in a way I hadn't known I could, deep, unhurried, deliberate. I focused on rebuilding myself, tracking down better job opportunities, carefully mapping out my finances, and even tackling the student loans that had haunted me for years. I started therapy, confronting the deep layers of hurt, the subtle lessons of inadequacy that had been pressed into me like invisible weights. I realized slowly, painfully, that love without respect is meaningless, that the warmth of family doesn't erase the coldness of betrayal, and that sometimes standing up for yourself is the only way to survive. The birthday cake, the oops, still a disappointment moment, wasn't just a cruel joke. It was the spark that illuminated years of manipulation, the proof that the people who were supposed to protect me had prioritized themselves instead. Every slice, every laugh from that night symbolized the turning point when I began claiming my own life back. I set boundaries that no one could cross. I ignored calls that carried excuses, letters that tried to rewrite history, and messages that demanded forgiveness without acknowledgement. I wasn't out for revenge. I was out for freedom. For the first time, I felt the quiet power of being accountable only to myself, of defining my future on my own terms. Every small decision, every payment made on time, every application I completed, every step toward independence was a declaration. My life was mine, not a family fund, not a performance stage, not a collection of judgments and whispered disappointments. Walking through my small apartment one evening, the Chicago lights flickering through the blinds, I felt a sense of calm that was almost unfamiliar. I allowed myself to relish ordinary moments, cooking a meal I wanted to eat, buying a book that had nothing to do with school or career, sitting with my thoughts without fear of scrutiny. These were the markers of a life rebuilt from honesty, resilience, and self-respect. If there's one lesson I can share, it's this. Standing up for your rights, claiming what belongs to you, and refusing to let others rewrite your story is not an act of anger, it's an act of survival. I discovered that truth and fairness can be slow and painstaking, but once you step into them, they become unstoppable forces. I have my future, my education, my independence, and my voice, and nothing anyone else can do will take that away. So to everyone who's been listening from the beginning, thank you for staying with me. I hope my story reminds you that your value isn't defined by anyone else's narrative. Whether you're watching from Chicago, London, Paris, or anywhere else in the world, I want to wish you a safe, peaceful, and joyful Christmas. Remember to cherish the people who truly respect you, and don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. If you found my journey inspiring or relatable, please hit like and subscribe to hear more stories from women sharing their lives, struggles, and triumphs. There's strength in these voices, and I promise, the courage to reclaim your life is always worth it.